So the good face is an expression that comes from Moneyball, from Michael Lewis's book about Billy Beane. And that whole book is really about how can you actually separate kind of ability from chance, how can you separate ability from things that seem like they have something to do with performance but actually have nothing to do with it, or the like. And the metaphor of the good face is basically that's the way scouts oftentimes talk about baseball players that they like. When they're trying to explain why they think that a team should draft this player, they'll often say, he has a good face. And Billy Beane, who was the general manager of the Oakland A's, himself had a very good face. He's a very good-looking guy. And he also, more importantly, had a great kind of baseball body. He was it looked like he was incredibly skilled. The only problem was that he actually ended up being pretty much unable to hit. And so he ended up, despite looking like everything you would want in a baseball player, actually being a pretty poor player. And he, unlike most of us, actually learned from this experience and basically said that instead of kind of evaluating people based on what they look like or things that we think are relevant but actually are irrelevant, we need to try to remove that kind of subjective dimension and look at sort of objective dimensions in terms of performance. But as it happens, the good face has a big impact in a lot of different places. So many of you probably know that height has an inordinate influence on politics. It has an inordinate influence in the corporate world and like. If you actually look at the correlation between height and sort of where you stand in the corporate ladder, taller people tend to go further. In most elections, the taller president tends to win and the like. Now, people have tried to come up with arguments about why this might be the case, but the obvious one is simply that people who are tall look like what we expect leaders to look like, and therefore we assume that they are actually going to do a better job than they actually are. In the NFL, paradoxically, where you might think like physical ability has everything to do with it, the NFL has a combine every year where they basically have people try out and they run the 40 and they lift weights and everything like that. And the strange thing is that there's almost no correlation actually between the performance in the combine and actual performance on the field. And yet the combine does actually have an impact on how we end up drafting. So we are subject to all of these factors that end up influencing us. And I think it's one of the reasons why actually forecasting ability ends up being much harder than perhaps it should be. And it's probably why something like 30 to 50% of all executive hires end up either in firing or in resignation. And it's why, in general, exceptional performance is not something that people are very, very good at predicting.